So these notes today are going to cover the Holocaust, and one thing to keep in mind while studying this is that the Holocaust occurs during the entirety of World War II, and even before it, when the Nazis take power. So it goes all the way from 1933 to 1945 at the very end of the war. So the most important vocab for the Holocaust is obviously concentration camps, and concentration camps aren't a German thing. Every country has done something like a concentration camp at one point or another, but it is just where people are put in a certain area when they're considered an enemy to the government, wherever government they are in. Obviously, the Holocaust is how Jews refer to the genocide that occurred during World War II, and crematoriums are places where bodies are burned. So just some very early background on Europe before the Holocaust. So there were 9 million Jews in Europe in 1939. And by 1945, there were only 3.8. That's a rough estimate, Jews left in Europe. 6 million of them were killed in the Holocaust. So you can see that the Nazis actually got very close to their goal of ridding Europe of its Jews. Europe had a long history of anti-Semitism, and anti-Semitism is the hatred of Jews. If someone is anti-Semitic, they do not like the Jewish people. It can range in terms of how that hatred is played out, but you can see through this painting here, this is from like medieval France, and it shows Jews in the country being burned. So it wasn't the Nazis who kind of came up with this idea. So Hitler becomes Chancellor of Germany in 1933 after being voted into power, and he believes in this thing called the stabbed in the back myth. And this is the idea that the German army had never been beaten during World War I, but was instead stabbed in the back by the Jews, the politicians, the communists who were in Germany and gave up the war because they wanted to control Germany. And you can see this cartoon down here. You have your proud German soldier in the trenches watching the line, being ready to be stabbed in the back by the stereotypical, characterization of Jews at that time from Europe. So he believes that all the Germans need to be united together. He's that ultranationalist idea, and Hitler says that all Germans need to come together, be united by the fatherland, be united in Germany, and work together. And together, Germans will gain Lebensraum. We've gone over this a little before, but the living space that Germans need to survive. And that living space is going to come from Eastern Europe, places like Poland, Czechoslovakia, mostly the Soviet Union. But the people who live there are considered the inferior peoples. So the inferior peoples are these people below: the Slavs, the Jews, and the Roma and the Sinti. Slavs are obviously like your Russians, your Poles. The Jews, a lot of them live in those areas. And the Roma and the Sinti are two groups that a lot of people know as gypsies, but we're going to call them by their proper ethnic names of Roma and Sinti. So Hitler's whole goal is to invade Eastern Europe, conquer it, exterminate the people there, and then eventually resettle it with Germans. This video here explains what Lebensraum is, but even from just the picture here, you can kind of see his goal. Hitler's going to expand Germany into those areas and eventually exterminate the people there, resettle it with Germans. So the Nazis begin their persecution of the Jews immediately upon gaining power, and you can't think of the Holocaust as Hitler gets power and immediately, Auschwitz is set up, Auschwitz-Birkenau, Sobibor are set up, and he just begins exterminating the Jews of Europe. It's a slow progression towards genocide. So at first, it's just laws that regulate how Jews live. The law for the restoration of the professional service, it begins to get rid of Jews in professional life. So Jews can't work for the government, they can't do certain jobs, and it restricts their professional life and their economic life. So this takes away a lot of jobs from Jewish people. And you're going to see that one of the things it does is it actually traps Jews in Germany. They can't even immigrate out of the country because now they don't have the money and they're considered politically unreliable. So they're followed by the Gestapo, the Nazi secret police. They are monitored all the time. The Nuremberg Laws are the next big thing, and this is one of the things you should probably star. This makes it so Jews lose their citizenship in Germany. And if you lose your citizenship somewhere, you no longer have rights in that country. You're just living there. It sets up these racial categories where if you have this number of, in this combination of Jewish grandparents or parents, you're considered Jewish, but if you don't, you're considered Aryan. It makes it so Jews cannot marry non-Jews also. So marriages are annulled. The people who married Jews are considered what Hitler called race traitors because they married outside their race of Aryans. And it officially takes away Jews' rights to vote. So this restricts Jews politically. It restricts them in daily life. And combine that with the laws that we had from the earlier slide, you can see that Jews are very, very limited now on what they can actually do and how they can make a living. The next kind of step in the Nazis' persecution of the Jews is going to be Kristallnacht, which happens in November. And this is the first real organized violence the Nazis begin to persecute against the Jewish community in Germany. And Kristallnacht stands for Night of the Broken Glass, and it's where the Nazis whip up a mob into a frenzy because of the assassination of a Nazi ambassador in France by a Jewish man. And it leads to storefront windows being broken, synagogues being burned down, Jewish men and women being attacked in the streets. And it gets its name, the Night of the Broken Glass, from, if you look at this picture, the German people go throughout Jewish areas and bust out all the windows in Jewish-owned businesses and loot them. And this kind of sends a message to the Jewish community of you're not welcome, and it's kind of the foreshadowing of what is going to come with the Holocaust once World War II really starts. During and after Kristallnacht, there is a policy of Aryanization where Jewish businesses are given over to Aryans. So if you didn't know, Aryans are what Hitler considers the perfect German people. That's what he considers the German race to be. So the idea is to take businesses away from Jewish-owned and give them over to Aryan-owned. It's trying to reduce Jews' economic influence in Germany. So a lot of Jewish workers will even be fired if they already work at an Aryan business as well. During this time, the Nazis are building up their camp system, and their camps aren't just for Jews. It's considered to be anyone who is an enemy of the state, and as you should already know, state means government. So people like Jews are sent to the camps, communists, the Roma, the Sinti, and mentally and physically handicapped as well. The camps are built in every single area of Germany and areas that Germany would conquer during World War II. And most camps are going to be labor camps where people actually go to build things for the German Empire. A few of the camps are going to be death camps, where people are sent, mostly Jews, to be killed immediately upon arrival. You can see here that most of the death camps are going to be located in Poland during the Holocaust. And this fits with Hitler's goal of Lebensraum, because if you remember, the German people are going to invade Poland first, exterminate the people there, and then resettle it with Germans. If the war would have gone on, you would have saw death camps move up into the Baltic countries in the Soviet Union, because that was the next step in Hitler's plan to gain Lebensraum for the German people. So these are just the different color-coded triangles that people would wear in the Nazi concentration camp system. It was all based on who you were and what you did. Obviously, Jews would have their yellow Star of David, but the different groups all had a different triangle to indicate what they did. So with the invasion of Poland in 1939, the Germans come into possession, essentially, of large numbers of people they consider enemies of the state, mostly Jews. And Poland is that area for Lebensraum. So the first thing that the Germans begin to do is building the ghettos in cities. Ghetto is an old European word, and it usually just indicated where Jews lived in a city, and the Germans kind of bring this back, the Nazis bring this back. So the Jews were deported to the walled off sections of each of the cities where they would live, and it's just terrible conditions. There's not enough housing, there's not enough food, people literally starving in the streets. And the Jews are expected to govern themselves in those areas and keep separate from the rest of the Polish population. This also happens to the Roma and the Sinti, but obviously there's not as many of them, so their ghettos are a little smaller. You can see some of the deportations to the ghettos here. What life was like in the ghettos, you can see children quite literally starving in the streets, the walled off section of the city literally splitting apartment buildings in half. So the first step in the gaining of the Lebensraum and eliminating people who take up too many resources is the T4 program. This is based on the idea of eugenics, and the Germans say that they want to get rid of undesirable traits in the Aryan race. So they begin to either sterilize or eliminate the mentally and physically disabled. At first they use sterilization, but then they begin to use euthanasia and gas vans, where people will be put in the back of a van, driven around, and the exhaust from the van or poison gas will be dropped into the back of it, so the people will die. This is kind of the pilot program for the final solution. It is used to test all the methods and the chemicals that they will eventually use at camps like Auschwitz, Sobibor, and Treblinka. You can see the idea down here that the Nazis are pushing is that a disabled person costs this much to maintain their life, while a whole German family costs this much. So the Nazis say that it's not worth it to have the disabled person because then the money can be better spent on a German family. So with the invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, the final solution really begins. And the final solution is what the Nazis call the final solution to the Jewish question. And this is going to be the beginning of the elimination of all the Jews of Europe. So at first, the Nazis developed the Einsatzgruppens, which are literally mobile killing units. And they're under the command of Heinrich Himmler, right here. And they follow the German army. So when the German army is pushing through areas in Eastern Europe, the Einsatzgruppen are following them, and they are carrying out killings of the Jews, the communists, the Roma, and the Sinti in the area. They originally shoot the victims one by one, but eventually they will use those gas vans that were created by the T4 program to make the process more efficient, as bad as that sounds. The thing about the Holocaust that makes it stick out in human history so much is the industrialized killing that happened. The Nazis were obsessed with trying to do it as efficiently and cheaply as possible. In 1941, a lot of the extermination camps had been built, and they finally begin their operations. And these are the camps that have infamous names in human history, like Sobibor, Treblinka, and obviously Auschwitz-Birkenau. The ghettos begin to be emptied from the various areas that the Nazis have conquered, and the people are deported to the camps, and most people die within hours of arriving. Originally, again, they used the gas vans and firing squads, but when the Nazis find that is too inefficient, they begin to build the gas chambers, and the people are told they're going to go to a shower, the gas is turned on, and they die, and then they are cremated. There's a lot of medical experiments on Jewish people who come because the Jews are viewed as less than rats, so the Nazis have no problem doing experiments on them to try and figure out new vaccines or new treatments for wounds on the battlefield. And at the same time, millions are worked to death as slave labor in the various camps around Germany in the occupied areas. This is the time period when most Jewish people will die during the Holocaust, during this final solution kind of era. You can see here the famous photo of Auschwitz, arrival of Hungarian Jews. So this picture up here, most people that are in this area will die within hours because at Auschwitz, it wasn't a labor camp. The only reason people were sent there was to be killed. You can see the deportations to the camps from 1942 to 1944. They came from all over Europe, and again, mostly Jews. At the 1942 Wannsee Conference, the Nazis, all the top Nazis meet to finalize the final solution and their plans for the future conquests of Britain, the Soviet Union, different areas around the world. And they decide that Reinhard Heydrich, this guy up here, is going to oversee the final solution. He's going to help design, build the camp system, and Adolf Eichmann down here is going to eventually deport everyone from the ghettos to the camps and clear out the ghettos. This guy will be killed in Czechoslovakia by resistance, and this guy will actually be caught by the Israeli Mossad in the 60s or the 70s and sent back to Israel to be executed. By 1944, most of the concentration camps begin to be liberated as the Allies and the Soviets close in from the east and west on the Third Reich. And most of the prisoners who get released are in critical condition. Obviously, they've been starved to death. Most people in the camps have severe trauma, and thousands upon thousands die as they're released from the starvation, the medical experiments that they endured. So the impact of the Holocaust is 11 to 12 million people are left dead. Some people say that that is a little too conservative of an estimate because really we'll never know the numbers because the Nazis destroyed a lot of the records as the Allies approached. 2/3 of European Jews were killed. So if you were Jewish in Europe at this time, you had a 66% chance of dying in the Holocaust, and 5 million other people, so those different groups that were in the camps, are killed as well. One of the things that comes out of the Holocaust is Israel becomes a country. Because of the Holocaust, millions of Jews don't want to return to their homes in Europe, so they begin to immigrate to Israel. Then the UN recognizes Israel as a country because of the Holocaust, and the survivors begin to go there. Because of the Holocaust genocide, so the targeting of one group specifically for their religion, their race, their ethnicity, becomes a war crime, and it's called a crime against humanity. So if you commit a crime against humanity, you have committed a crime so bad you didn't just commit it against one person, you committed it against anyone who ever lived. And you can be tried for this now by the UN because it was written as an actual crime. And the Nazis who then committed those crimes will be hunted down, found, and brought to trial. So I hope these notes kind of helped you with the Holocaust and make sense of some of the different events that occurred during it. And if you need any help or you have any questions, just let me know.